Good evening, everyone. Hopefully, you guys are all doing well this Thanksgiving week. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Happy upcoming Thanksgiving to you. Hopefully, you will have wonderful plans with friends and family. And I think I wonder if it was Matthew Flynn last week who said, "And don't let anyone tell you otherwise." And that's true. That is true. So, have a wonderful Thanksgiving in advance. And actually, just before I get started, I'm going to drop a commentary video on Thanksgiving Day on overindulgence, on overindulging in art. And the prime example is the character Ahsoka Tano of Star Wars. I love Ahsoka Tano, but I have a case against her continuous use. Yeah, so I'll be talking about overindulgence, and maybe I'll follow up next week on a stream on how to avoid overindulgence in your art or overindulging in your art. So let's check with audio, of course. Does audio sound great, everyone? It sounds pretty good. My voice sounds higher than normal, but I don't know, maybe I'm under pressure, under stress. Usually, if my voice is a degree higher, just so you know, I'm under some stress or some pressure, even if I'm not aware of it. If my voice is nice and relaxed and low, I'm just low key. So we're going to welcome the chat, and we're going to piggyback off of what we had seen with Catholic Bible Geek and his wonderful book study, the excellent book study on the Chronicles of Narnia. And this is The Magician's Nephew. This is the first, I would say, first installment in terms of the chronology of events. It's one of my favorites. In fact, I think The Magician's Nephew is my favorite of all the books. It's kind of strange because it's the beginning and it's not the climactic ending. And all the subsequent books, apart from Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, the other subsequent books are really self-contained. I would say Voyage of Dawn Treader and a little bit into The Silver Chair has, I think Prince Caspian, Voyage of Dawn Treader, and The Silver Chair, they're more or less linked. But Horse and His Boy, I remember that being a separate story. Magician's Nephew is great because it's the leading into Narnia. It's the beginning of Narnia. And we're going to talk about music used as an example in the Magician's Nephew. I've got some excerpts I'd like to read off, and this is actually totally off the cuff. This is impromptu. I haven't had time to work through and not analyze, so this will be an impromptu analysis. And we'll talk in addition to reading excerpts, we'll talk about writers using musical descriptions and depictions in their work, because this is not exclusive to the Chronicles of Narnia. I have seen it many times. I've seen this done many times with authors in science fiction. Of course, we see it with Tolkien and his high fantasy. And so if it's an encouragement to you writers, try to use music as much as possible, even if you're describing something vague. Maybe you have an idea of what a world looks like or what a shape looks like, and it evokes some sort of musical depiction. Or maybe there's this song, a song of a siren. How would you describe the song of a siren? Is it clear? Is it prolonged? Is it delicate? Is it sinuous? All these things you can use as cues for writing. So we will use The Magician's Nephew as our example for tonight. And if you guys like a stream like this, if I see more musical examples in the Chronicles of Narnia, I'm happy to do that too, in addition. So welcome to a low-key chat today, a nice discussion. This will be fun. I have no idea. I've never done any book studies, so we'll see how this rolls. Let us welcome the chat. So Netter's Network was second, and I like this little thing that she did. Hi, sweetie. Heart. Hi, sweetie. Heart. That's better. And for psychiatric help, for 5 cents, the fee of 5 cents, you can talk to Dr. Y, seeing how he's He's going to give you some good advice. And I knew it was a Peanuts reference, the Peanuts reference. We will see her help Charlie Brown for the Charlie Brown Christmas. I've seen her role as a psychiatrist in other shorts, but I can't remember if she's involved with that kind of alter ego, if you will, with the other holiday specials. I can't remember. I know it's Christmas, but I don't think it's in the others. All right, there's me saying I am a few minutes late, and I was about 5 or 6 minutes late. And Matthew Flynn, welcome. And Aged Boomer, welcome. So I hope Monday nights are good for you to stop by, Aged Boomer, but I know you have some projects. And Melissa Harris, welcome. And with a tired voice, nursing his tired voice. What do I recommend for a tired voice? I think salt, like gargling salt, hot water, chamomile tea. I love ginger root. I bought this big thing of ginger root over the last week, and I was slicing into it to put it into my green tea, and this dark juice just comes out. And it looks like a healthy piece of ginger root, but I didn't care for what it looked like. It should be kind of a bright, beautiful yellow, and it was not that. It kind of reminded me of the dark juice of the fruit where Jadis is biting into the apple. For the record, I might say Jadis. I've always pronounced that name that way in my head as a kid. I read Chronicles of Narnia every summer as a kid. I remember going through that series pretty much all the time as a kid, and I've always associated her as Jadis. There's something a little bit more formidable, a little bit, just the long I and the A that is a bit more intimidating in my ears. But if it's Jadis, that is fine too. And Wolf 10, hey there, Sound Engraver. Hey there, Wolf 10. And Jedi Master Zetopia. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. You too. Is engraving nicely. Well, I'm not engraving. I might actually turn down the heat for a minute. Let me be right back. I'm going to turn down the thermostat, and then we will get started. 1 second. Forgot to change that. That's great. I totally forgot to change the avatar, but that's fine. That's fine. We're in the holiday spirit, so that was my R2-D2 cosplay. I think I have everyone except Troy. Hey, Troy. Oh, can't forget Big Al Presents. Wonderful book study, guys. Thank you. Oh, and then Troy's also recommending honey, ginger, and lemon tea. Yeah, I agree. Lemon's good. Lemon is good. All right. Oh, Matthew Flynn says, Silverchair was the only book I've written, but that was years ago. It's kind of a self-contained story, but all the characters, Eustace is from The Voyage of Dawn Treader, and he had a huge arc in that book. Then he's the main hero of that installment, The Silverchair. I remember being fascinated by the villainness. Jadis is an amazing villain. She's one of my favorites. I've just really loved her as a villain. And I didn't know this as a kid. And in fact, I didn't know this until coming on board with Professor Geek's channel. But that archetype, that elemental evil, I think it's very important to put in elemental evil in stories. We have that with Emperor Palpatine. We have this with Jadis. And I remember reading an article. This one woman, this academic woman, had beef with having Jadis be the villain because she's a woman. I was like, she's tough, she's formidable, she's scary, she has the prince on his knees. He has to overcome the terror that she is, especially in the silver chair. She's a very formidable, very intimidating villain, and well done. I just love her story, or how she's depicted in the story, especially with charm, especially with the magician's nephew. So, speaking of which, we're kind of getting into the 10-minute mark here. So, why don't we get started? And welcome, Evie. Nice to see you. And evening to you. Okay. Yeah, Troy says that is so adorable. I appreciate Phoenix's art. That was good fan art. Five of those art pieces in like a weekend. I mean, so he's a talented artist, wherever he is. So let's go ahead and get started with just reading excerpts. I'd like to start probably in order. I've got these marked, and there's no real connection between any of them unless I find something off the cuff. They're just separate examples of the story. So I will be reading a little bit out of Magician's Nephew if you've followed along the book study or also know the story. I don't think there are going to be spoilers. It's not really, I don't think you can talk about, spoilers in a book like this. It's one installment of 7. So we will start with, well, I should probably go in order. The first musical example, and I don't have this marked, but I do remember this. The first musical example we have actually is an unusual one. It's not so much a musical depiction, but a musical action. And this musical action is uncanny, and it's unnatural, and it's magical. It's the introduction of the world of magic in C.S. Lewis's books. And that is a hum, a kind of hum, where we see, through Polly's perspective, we see, and also Diggory's perspective, the rings, the magic rings that Uncle Andrew has, and they are humming. They are humming. They're kind of calling to Polly. She's enticed by them. They're very beautiful. But when I'm hearing the humming out of the rings, I don't think of something lovely. I don't think of something bell-like. I don't think of something, it's described as almost like a vacuum cleaner a few stories down, if vacuum cleaners were invented at that time. So it has kind of this uncanny drone coming out of these rings, something small, something that you can pick up. And they come at the children's hearing. The children hear them as a faint sound, as I think kind of in a way like a luring sound, like a bit of a soft siren. I'm coming. I have come to you from a different world. I have been fashioned in this world, but I am coming to you from a different place. Come to me. I will take you to where I am from. And it's supposed to be eerie. I think it developed in me as a child with the imagination. Like I imagine, being in a room with a tray of these rings, and as a kid, I pictured them vibrating a little bit. Not like a violent shake, but a hum. If it's generated through a piece of metal, it's going to have some bit of vibration. So I kind of pictured as a kid. I even knew the physics of this as a kid. That the hum is generated, it's produced. It's almost electronically produced. It's magically produced, if you will, and it's this slight vibration of all these rings, both the gold and the green. And I think that's actually a terrifying image where Polly, totally unsuspected, she says, wow, if I didn't know any better, I would say these rings were humming. She picks up the yellow ring, and she's gone. She's totally transported into another world. So that's the first example of music depicted in the stories. This is to introduce to the reader the idea of magic. London in this setting is the mundane. They are stripped out. These children are stripped, I should say, they are stripped from the mundane. they're transported into another world, a magical world, and it's through these magical rings. And as we see toward the end, you know, especially with our meeting with Aslan and his explaining what these rings were about, and that kind of magic versus his power. He's of a magical, fantastical place, but he's not really. There's no magic conveying or being. There's not really a kind of magic being described when C.S. Lewis is talking about Aslan. He's about power. He's about calling things into existence. He's about presence. So, we had seen in The Magician's Nephew, he sings a song, and I'll get to that in a moment. But he sings a song, and boom, the cabbie's wife appears. Just no magic ring. So we understand there's a bit of evil. There's a bit of insidiousness. There's something odious, something wrong, not quite right with these rings, not quite right with the hum of these rings, because they were produced by dark magic or black magic. They were produced by Uncle Andrew, or with his knowledge, and maybe with some experiments and people who practiced things like witchcraft and voodoo. They're experimenting with this magical dust that had come from a different world, or dirt. I can't remember. I think it was dust or dirt. But these people are dealing with kind of a sinful magic. They're not dealing with good power. So the hum of these rings are conveying that eeriness, like, I'm supposed to entice you. Come, pick me up, and I will take you to a different magical world. Fortunately, the children do go to the wood between the worlds, which is a good, wholesome place between the worlds, that life is everywhere. And so they go through that, and then they hop back to the pool to see if London's going to be there, and they go back to the wood between the worlds, and then they go into Charm, the accursed charm. And that's going to be my next example of music. And talking about this uncanny, kind of eerie, kind of wicked hum of rings. Well, a scene of The Magician's Nephew that has this scene. It would be so wonderful to see this depicted on film, but I've had this scene in my imagination ever since I was a kid, because I've read these books all the time as a kid. And one of the most provocative, I would say, one of the most provocative scenes is the bell that entices Diggory to commit his first sinful act. And so I think I will read the passage of the bell, because I just think it's really a good thing to describe. And I'll take it away. I don't really read in public, so we'll see how this goes. So Polly does not want Diggory reading the bell, so Diggory's under this huge temptation. I kind of side with Diggory in a way. Like, not that I think I would condone Diggory for his committing this sinful act. He succumbed to temptation. But the riddle on the pillar where this bell is, this small pillar, the riddle reads: "Make your choice, adventurous stranger. Strike the bell and bide the danger, or wonder till it drives you mad. What would have followed if you had?" I mean, that's I can imagine myself kind of going crazy, like, what would have happened? Now, of course, we understand by the riddle that it is, hey, brave the danger. There's going to be danger if you strike this bell. And I think it's quite beautiful. Polly's like, no fear. We're not going to do that. We don't want danger. Well, that's easy. And then Diggory's thinking, no. We'll wonder for the rest of our lives what would have happened if we struck the bell. He succumbed to his temptation. He forces Polly, he pins her arm down so she can't get at her ring. And then with a little smart tap, you can imagine a little mischievous boy just making a smart tap on the bell. This is kind of a little bell, I believe. I think it's a smaller bell. I do believe, I Yes. Yeah, let me describe the actual bell. The thing in the middle of the room was not exactly a table. It was a square pillar about 4 feet high, and on it there rose a little golden arch, from which there hung a little golden bell. And besides this, there lay a little golden hammer to hit the bell with. And I love that. I love that description, little, because it's almost innocuous. It's like, oh, it's supposed to be pretty. It's supposed to be enticing. It's supposed to be uh, uh, playful. This is a playful thing. When I think of little golden bell hung on a little golden arch, what do I think of is some sort of ornament in a church or in a grammar school or something quaint, something quite nice, an ornament of maybe some nice elderly lady's home. That is a very good depiction, and I wanted to talk about the description. I wanted to describe that bell for you because little and golden, especially the word little, that could not emit too much of a sound. Yeah, it can have a nice strike. It can have a nice, attack of the note, and it could sound, especially in a completely quiet room, especially a room where they are in Charn, where it's a throne room of all these, wooded structures and statues of people. I think that was made of wood. Oh, and also clothing, but also stone, stone arches and all of that. So yes, even a little bell can emit a very sharp sound, a very loud sound in such a quiet, desolate place. I mean, they're the only two living beings in that whole world. I will never forget how Charn impacted me as a kid. I don't think there is enough concept art or conceptual art. I think it's concept art on that kind of world. It just evokes a very strange, eerie sense, kind of like the strange, eerie sense of the hum of the rings. But so we're going to get back to the children. Polly calls Diggory an obstinate pig. Like, no, don't do it. We're going to have danger. Why do you want to, go through that? So let's see. So after Diggory holds Polly's arm down so she can't, so her movement is restricted, he leans forward, picks up the hammer, and strikes the golden bell with a light, smart tap. Okay, so if you were to place before me as a musician, I'm not a percussionist, but I have enough musical sense. If you were to place a bell, especially a small bell, right in front of me, and I have a little golden hammer and I just give it a smart tap, it should be a very restricted, small sound. Loud, certainly loud in a stone room in a desolate place like Charn, but still small enough. But I'm going to read what happens. A smart tap would go doo, and then just decay. That's very interesting that the action, Diggory's action, is small. It's a very small little gesture at the bell. So it says, so Polly's furious, she's so angry. But within 2 seconds, however, they had something to think about that drove their own quarrels quite out of their minds. As soon as the bell was struck, it gave out a note, a sweet note, such as you might have expected, as I would, as a musician, would have expected, and not very loud. But instead of dying away again, which it ought to do, it went on. And as it went on, it grew louder. Before a minute had passed, it was twice as loud as it was to begin with. It was soon so loud that if the children tried to speak, they weren't speaking now, of course. They were just standing with their mouths open. They would not have heard one another. So that has to be some force. That has to be some decibel level. That has to be some sound where they couldn't hear each other with normal speaking voices. That is pretty evocative, or provocative, I should say. Very soon it was so loud that they could not have heard one another even by shouting. That's loud. That's actually harmful to your ears. And it still grew, and still it grew. All on one note, a continuous sweet sound, though the sweetness had something horrible about it. till all the air in that great room was throbbing with it, and they could feel the stone floor trembling under their feet. Then at last it began to be mixed with another sound, a vague, disastrous noise, which sounded first like a roar of a distant train, then a crash of a falling tree. They heard something like great weights falling, finally a sudden rush and thunder, and a shake that nearly flung them off their feet. About a quarter of the roof at one end of the room had fallen in, or fell in. Shouldn't use passive voice here. Great blocks of the masonry fell all around them, and the walls rocked. The noise of the bell stopped. The clouds of dust cleared away, and everything was quiet again. So it's come to this level, this volume that is actually affecting the whole world around them. Sound of that magnitude would permanently damage your hearing. It would probably cause, in some way, depending on the experience, it could probably cause some brain damage or definitely, the actual structure of your ear. And then what makes it worse is I think C.S. Lewis gives us this idea that the bell stops. The bell sound stops. What is kind of horrible? One thing, and this happened a lot in the academics. The way to get your audience uncomfortable in music, especially like electronic music, is to have this growing sound and then kill it at the quick, because we naturally want closure or a sense of decay. But this ramping up at this detrimental volume, starting with a sweet small sound, ramping up, growing at this detrimental volume, and then cutting off, that's not natural, especially if it's not produced by a human. So I can sing quite loudly, or I could be a part of a whole orchestra where we start out very small and then ramp up to this huge volume. My book's fallen off of my lap. But then the conductor would just cut us off, and then we stop. That's a very dramatic, I would say very frightening effect, especially in an accursed place like Charn. So you can imagine how devastated these two children are. They can't hear each other. They can't shout. They can't, hearing, your ears are your sense of balance. If you do not have good hearing, you have a little bit of instability with your sense of balance. You're off. You're thrown. Your proprioception is off. You can't feel your feet, so to speak. And they couldn't feel their feet with the earthquake, with the rushing noises, all from a sweet sound, from a sweet tap. And I wanted to talk about that because, yeah, this is a magical place, and it's an accursed place. There's a curse to this beautiful golden bell. So it's magical, but what makes it really eerie and uncanny is that it's doing the exact opposite of what is natural. So a small tap, you've got a strike, and an attack of a sound, a decay, and ultimately a release of a sound. But with a small sound here, it's a single note too. That's what makes this scene so terrifying in my mind. And even as a child, I was really provoked by this idea. It's one tone, one sound. Doo. There's no complexity, which is also weird because it's a bell, and a bell needs to have harmonics. It needs to have overtones. Yes, you could say a small bell, a golden bell, has one like sine tone or one pure tone. But it's still, a bell is constructed with inharmonicity. It's supposed to have a color of sound. It's supposed to have the complexities, all the complexities of a tone, not something so pure. So if you can imagine something so pure, a sound starting small and then ramping up to something of such magnitude as to bring walls down, it's a very terrifying thought. You're supposed to have an attack, decay, and release. But in this world, in this curse, it starts from a very small sound and it doesn't decay. It ramps up. And I find that to be really, maybe it's because I'm a musician, but I mean, even as a kid, I found that scene to be very horrifying. And so I thought Lewis was very, very clever in putting this in this real, kind of dark, twisted way. And what does it do ultimately? It summons the witch. It summons the evil. So it's not just enough that it stops, but it summons the evil. It brings the witch back to life from her own curse, from her own spell. So that was the bell. Let's go ahead and take a look at the chat. And I'd love your insight, guys, of what you think. And then actually any side comments, because I want to get through Magician's Nephew, but any side comments, I'll come back and look at the chat if you guys want to talk about Star Wars or something. Matthew Flynn says, the way you describe the yellow and green rings reminds me of the One Ring of the Lord of the Rings. That's I think that was a good call on the film, New Line Cinema and Peter Jackson and the writers. It was a good call that they used a kind of voice, a kind of vocal sound for the ring. It's supposed to be enticing you. It's supposed to be saying, I have power. I can bring you to this world. In the case with Lewis's two children, protagonists. So that was pretty interesting. But I do like that. I like that the movie makers did make this kind of alluring sound, like I think it's a male voice used in the movies, but it's speaking, what was it called, black speech or Mordor, the tongue of Mordor. I can't remember what that was called. But it was the language of Mordor. Oh, I think it is Elvish. Isn't Mordor a kind of Elvish language? But anyway, I think the male vocal artist who was part of the ring, who was involved with the ring, spoke in that speech, in that tongue, and it was a good effect. It was good on their part to choose that. Professor Geek says, great point. Little bell, little hammer, and little tone. But from little sins come the enormity of resonance. Yeah, it's kind of, it's so beautiful that they made it to where she came back to life because of one sin, of a little boy too. He was just tempted, and he just thought, well, I'm going to show you. And he just, can you imagine a little kid, probably not more than, 9 or 10 years old, just go, boop, ha, I did it. And it's fine. And then the worst evil happens. and that's the enormity of sin, where I keep dropping my book, where you start out with maybe even best intentions, but you start out, kind of playing with these desires, and the act can be small at first, but ultimately it will affect not just you, but other people around you. Oop, I skipped down. Talking about bells, bells ringing makes me think of the episode arc in Tailspin, For Whom the Bell Clangs. I used to watch Tailspin as a kid, but the problem is I don't remember a lot of the Tailspin, arcs. I remember more of the Rescue Rangers episodes, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. Yeah, actually, it's actually Charn with an N at the end. I think of the Transformers season 3. So it's a little bit, Melissa. Narnia, it's Wizard of Oz meets Lord of the Rings. I mean, as far as going on a journey and finding something. But I would say that with The Magician's Nephew, the children come upon Narnia by their accounts by total accident. Of course, I think Aslan had something to do with it too. All right. So I think I will continue reading because I have a couple other examples, maybe a few. All right. So I believe, let's see. Wait, hold on. I would like to go in order. So the next musical example really doesn't happen until the founding of Narnia and the establishment and the creation. And if you are familiar with C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, they were companions. They were literary companions. They both were professors, highly educated men, both in the higher education, university setting. As I think they were both English professors. Prof, correct me on that. Now I know Tolkien was a linguist, or no, a philologist, and C.S. Lewis had his other specialties, but they were companions. And I like that the founding of Narnia, I don't actually know which came first, but the founding of Narnia is done by song. The creation of the world, the creation of that world is done by song. And it's the same way with the Ainulindale by Tolkien in the Silmarillion. I think it's the prologue, or at least it's the very introduction, at the very start of that book, where Iluvatar, or Eru Iluvatar, the god figure in that book, brings forth life through song. And I think that's very, very important. I should have taken a look, and if you guys have time to look yourselves, but there are verses of song. There are verses of God's song over his creation. It could be more abstract, from the English. It could have been different with the Hebrew or the Greek, but it's this idea that there is song. For instance, the Bible is chock full of all sorts of people breaking forth into song, or a kind of prayer. The Song of Moses, the Song of Miriam, Aaron, Aaron's sister, or Moses's sister. I think they're directly related, but I'm not sure as far as the family line. We have the Song of David. I mean, David is full of song. He's seen, dancing in his victories and giving God all the praise. That kind of culture back then, with the children of Israel, they would remember things and they would celebrate things with song. So song, the idea of song and music, is very, very, very important in the Judeo-Christian tradition. So I think it's really fitting for song to be in an actual literary context of creation itself, whether it's in The Magician's Nephew with Narnia or with Ainulindale in the Silmarillion. That's right. So Professor Geek says, you've got it. Tolkien was a philologist and Norse mythicist. Is that how you pronounce that? And Lewis was a classicist. Yeah, exactly, Evie. All of Psalms. Yep, exactly. So good. All right, so let's describe. Let's go into how Lewis does it. And if you guys want me to do like an analysis of the Ainulindale with Silmarillion, just let me know. I remember being quite fascinated. I remember being quite fascinated with it, where the God character in that story has a song, and then Melkor is enticed by the song, but he wants to make his own song, and so it's just this clashing of the two pieces of music, that Melkor has his own piece of music, but it's not working. It's not in harmony. It's not complementing the song of Iluvatar. And actually, when I was 19 or 20 years old, I knew I wanted to be a composer on some level, but I wanted to compose an orchestral piece, an orchestral and choral piece of Ainulindale. I wouldn't mind doing Ainulindale. I would do it in the electronic sense. It would still sound very much like instruments we're used to, but it would also have an otherworldly feel. I think electronic music can lend itself to some pretty interesting possibilities. But anyway, that is Ainul and Dale with Iluvatar and Melkor. Let's go back to Narnia. And I think I would say that I lost my place. All right. Okay, so I did find my place. And this might be a few passages, so just bear with me. I'm just kind of having fun with this. So all these characters, the two children, Polly and Diggory, the witch, Uncle Andrew, Diggory's uncle, and the cabbie and the horse had come upon a land of darkness. This world has not come to life yet. But in the darkness, something was happening at last. A voice had begun to sing. It was very far away, and Diggory found it hard to decide from what direction it was coming. Sometimes it seemed to come from all directions at once. Sometimes he almost thought it was coming out of the earth beneath them. Its lower notes were deep enough to be the voice of the earth herself. There were no words. There was hardly even a tune. But it was, beyond comparison, the most beautiful noise he had ever heard. It was so beautiful he could hardly bear it. The horse seemed to like it too. He gave a sort of a whinny a horse would give if after years of being a cab horse it found itself back in the old field where it used to play as a foal, and saw someone whom it remembered and loved coming across the field to bring it a lump of sugar. Let's actually talk about that just for a minute. First of all, Diggory, we're in Diggory's perspective, and he's hearing this noise. It's really described as a noise, a voice. It's not really any particular tune, not anything that he can perceive as a melody. It's a kind of noise, a voice, but he describes it as beautiful, the most beautiful thing he's ever heard. Now, what's really interesting is that he's hearing it from all directions. If you know, the beautiful thing about the human head and the human brain, and especially right here, we talk about the nose being the center. This is kind of the center, to the left, to the right. The beautiful thing about the design of the human head by God's design is that we can actually experience localization and spatialization, meaning we hear from our point of reference at the nose, we hear where sound is coming from behind us, above behind us, you know, beneath our ears, on the ground. We can perceive it in our feet. We can perceive that ground energy, especially as a low frequency. And so I like that it's coming from all directions, and it's coming from all directions at once. And sometimes it's perceived in the ground. Well, what does that tell us? Now, we do see that the song is coming from Aslan, the lion himself, but it strikes the omnipotence and omnipresence of a creator. So this idea that Aslan is bringing forth this world into existence, but he's also everywhere. This voice is also everywhere. So he can be at different points simultaneously. And so, you know, if the idea of God is quite complex, well, it makes sense because, as I believe as a Christian, he is within time in this dimension. He's also outside of time, meaning he could be everywhere at all points of the universe all at once. And this is beautifully conveyed in the creation of Narnia in The Magician's Nephew. Sometimes he thought it was coming out of the ground, out of the earth beneath him. Its lower notes were deep enough to be the voice of the earth herself. And that's really, really important. I think Lewis might have had some sound experiment or experience, or some sound knowledge of how sound travels, because when he talks about the ground of the earth herself being deep, being resonant, well, that's ground energy. So we have a human hearing threshold of 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. And 20 hertz is really low. It's really more like an oscillation, a fast oscillation that we can hear that's not really a tone, but travels most prominently in the ground. We call it ground energy or floor energy. So if if there's the idea of some sort of maybe construction out in the distance, but the floor is taking it in, or maybe a subwoofer is causing one side of the church to have a lot of that energy in the floor. You can feel it in your feet. That's a beautiful comparison, and I like that Lewis has put that in because it's something is deep, something is earthy, something is low in frequency, and that low in frequency also to me depicts the masculinity of the lion of Aslan himself. Let's see what is in the passages ahead, and then we'll take a break for chat. And then the cabbie says, "Oh, isn't this lovely?" Then two wonders happened at the same moment. One was that the voice was suddenly joined by other voices, more voices than you could possibly count. They were in harmony with it, the first voice, but far higher up the scale. Cold, tingling, silver voices. The second wonder was that of the blackness overhead, all at once, blazing with stars. Now, this is beautiful. It's talking about voices coming into fruition, but also harmonizing with the main original voice, the voice of origin, Aslan himself. And then it talks about being higher up in scale. Now, with scale, as a musician, you think of scale as 8 scale degrees or going up the diatonic scale, for instance. But let's say, I don't know C.S. Lewis's musical experience. Probably back then, I think more people had music lessons than they have now, just as a point of education, just the general education. So he might have had some music experience, some maybe experience in the choir, maybe boys choir, maybe some keyboard experience. Going up the scale, I can only imagine he meaning going up the register, so going up quite high, which is fitting, right? We're talking about stars. We're talking about a multitude of stars suddenly just coming at that. Can you imagine darkness? There's a voice, there's some ground energy, and then just the heavens opening up and billions of stars, billions of voices, or a multitude of voices, that too many voices you can count. And that multitude is singing in a high frequency. That makes sense. The stars are emitting light. These are young stars. These are stars that are transferring light, transferring that frequency very, very, very fast. Very, very fast. The faster the frequency, the higher the pitch. And he describes it as, what does he describe it as? Going further up the scale, cold, tingling, silvery voices. And as an electronic music composer who really works in sound experimentation, that makes total sense to me. I have that visceral response. I do have synesthesia as well, so maybe I just have a better image of what that feels like, or better perception of what that feels like. But when you think of silvery, something silvery, it evokes this kind of cold sense, but a young sense as well, with these young bright stars. I think of gold when I describe a sound as golden. I think warm. If I were to describe a sound to you as silver, I think cold. It's a colder color. It's a cooler color. It's a cooler feel. It's a tingly feel. So thinking of like a cascade of stars just singing over you overhead, especially after you've just seen blackness. That's a very euphoric sensation. It could draw a very euphoric sensation, at least to me. So that is that. And I love that Lewis says the second wonder was that the blackness overhead all at once was blazing with stars. They didn't come out gently one by one, as they do on a summer evening. It's not like, oh, ping here, or if you're ever up earlier in the morning and then you see kind of stars kind of fade out into the sunrise. No, this is just a chorus of billions of stars. I think that's really, really cool. One moment there had been nothing but darkness. The next moment, thousands of points of light leaped out. Single stars, constellation, planets, brighter and bigger than any in our world. The new stars and the new voices began at exactly the same time. So actually, that to me conveys like an angelic presence, like a multitude of angels just singing overhead, bringing God the glory, or bringing, gloriously chanting or singing praise to this new creation. If you had heard it as Diggory did, you would have felt quite certain that it was the stars themselves who were singing, that it was the first voice, the deep one, which had made them appear and made them sing. And I love that the cabbie responds, "Glory be." I think that's really fitting. It is nothing short of this glory. And I love that he says, I have been mad. I'm not going to even do the Cockney. I had been a better man. I would have been a better man all my life if I had known there were things like this. And moving on, and I'll try to find a stopping point of this passage before I move back to the chat. Moving on, the voice, now capitalized with a capital V, the voice on the earth was now louder and more triumphant, but the voices in the sky, after singing loudly with it for a time, began to get fainter, and now something else was happening. So what's happening is just this beautiful idea of transition. We've got a climactic, maybe not even climactic, but we definitely have a focal point in the music. We have some sort of trajectory happening in the music. You can imagine this being a symphony orchestra. You can imagine this being a symphony of electronic instruments, whatever the case is, whatever your imagination tells you. But we've got a real huge point in the music, and then a transition. The idea of the voices of the stars are fading. They're growing faint, while the original voice, the voice of Aslan, is remaining. That's pretty cool. And that's actually, he may have had composition lessons, but that's actually a very effective way of transitioning from one musical idea to the next, keeping something intact, something that was in the first part with everything else, but everything else fading away, keeping that first thing intact, and then transitioning into another thing. I love it. I just absolutely love it. Far away and down near the horizon, the sky began to turn gray. A light wind, very fresh, began to stir. The sky in one place grew slowly and steadily paler. You can see the shapes of the hills standing up dark against it like a silhouette. All the time, the voice went on singing. And the reaction of the children and the cabbie, it just open mouths and shiny eyes. And they love this voice. They love the singing. Whereas Uncle Andrew and the witch, the two characters that are depicted as the evil characters, as the villains, do not like this wholesome voice. They do not like this good music, this wholesome music. It's talking about the witch responding to it. Uncle Andrew wants to shrink away and just like crawl into a rat's hole, but the witch responds as, I hate this voice. I understand it to be more powerful than my power. And she wants to crush the world and any other world that has this voice, if she could. I think it talks about her smashing the worlds, if only to stop this voice, because it's the epitome of good. The children's reactions, because they're innocent, and the cabbie's reactions, because he's a nobleman, are just eyes shining, and their mouths are just gaped open, But the witch understands the music of all of them, above all of them, and her mouth is clenched shut. It's the opposite reaction. And then the eastern sky changed from white to pink, and from pink to gold. The voice rose and rose till all the air was shaking with it. Now that's pretty interesting. Air doesn't really shake, but molecules in the air move around. Sound moves around and through and changes the molecules in the air. So this voice has such a presence as the reader, as the characters involved, they can actually feel the change in the air because of how this voice is impacting the world. I think it's really cool. So the voice rose and rose, and just as it swelled to its mightiest and most glorious sound it had yet produced, the sun rose. Now, this is why I love music and literature complementing each other. We see this with opera, where text and music can complement each other, and poetry, and even things like sound poetry, but poetry that is set to music. Things like composers like Chopin, for instance, and and Schubert, and people using the German poem, by Goethe or whoever, using that as a German art song, putting text to music. And it could be the same with world building with your stories. If you guys are building worlds in your stories, have something dramatic happen in the music, or something that could at least be vaguely depicted in terms of music, and then have something visual happen. And that's pretty cool. He marries the visual with the audible, or the aural, the visual with the aural. So you hear it, you perceive it, and then you actually see it. It's as if the sun was singing. And maybe the children and the cabbie at first thought it was the sun singing. That's the maker, or that's the thing that is producing all this life and creation. Of course, we see later it is the lion, Aslan. Diggory, I love this. Diggory had never seen such a sun. The sun above the ruins of Charn looked older than ours. This looked younger, so it's a new sun. And it's just talking about all the glory of the sun, and its light shining upon the world. And it made you feel excited until you saw the singer, capital S, himself, and then you forgot everything else. And the singer is the lion. Huge, shaggy, and bright, stood facing the risen sun. Its mouth was open in song, and it was about 300 yards away. And I love there's kind of like a ruckus going on with the children threatening Uncle Andrew, and the witch saying, "Hey, back off. We're gonna leave you in this world if you don't leave us alone. We've got the rings, you don't." And then the cabbie's like, "Hush." What does he say? He says, "Hold your noise, everyone. I want to listen to the music." So that's great. So let's actually take a look at the chat here and see what you guys have to think, and then we'll move on. I think I have a few more examples, but they are shorter examples, I believe. Oh my goodness, Al. Whoa. Are we going to get dinged for that? Hush your mouth. Don't speak profanity on my chat. Hello, Schooner Tuna. Is that how you pronounce your name? Could the bells echo also be an allegory to how sin ripples across time? That's a good comparison. That's a beautiful description. Yes, of course, sound travels. As much as sound is temporal, it's also physical. It travels the distance. And, it depends on the space. It depends on the material of the room, the space of the room. Maybe it's across a mountain range, but the sound will travel directly out until it hits a surface. And depending on the surface, depending on the room, it can fling back at you as kind of an assault, because it travels quickly. So if you're in a contained room, you've got it echoing, and then the echoes are just coming back. It's those refractions, maybe not as much amplitude as the original source of sound, but it still will come at you. So the idea of the sound coming from a source and then rippling effect and then coming back at you. Yeah, that's a very good idea of what sin can do as well. Sin, based on your actions, even if they're small, sin can travel. Sin has distance if you let it, and you can't go that distance with sin. So yeah, I like that. I wouldn't have caught that. That's a very good comparison. The Tailspin arc was based around using 3 bells to find a lost city in the desert. The ancient city used sound and bells as offensive and defensive weapons. That's pretty cool. Yeah, sound can be very dangerous. Sound can be very dangerous, and so it could be used as a weapon as well. You just have to protect your ears if you're sounding off that weapon. Sound the alarm. And then Schooner Tuna says, music awakens the stories that which lay dormant within us. Music can do a lot of pretty cool things. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Music as the muse, as the thing to inspire you. Absolutely. I'm kind of half and half when I write my science fiction. Sometimes I will listen to music because it has the electronic music that I listen to has that effect, has that world building effect for my story. But sometimes I just listen to the white noise, behind me, like my heater or the fan, and then I just kind of zone in as well. I tend to listen to music when I write when I have something else stuck in my head. So if I do worship at my church, I don't even have to practice any of those songs. And if we do a rehearsal and another run through and the sermon or the service, I will have those worship songs stuck in my head for a good portion of the afternoon. So if I want to write, then I actually have to tune that out because the worship music is part of my world. I need to be in another world when I'm writing. DRY says, stories with music, every Disney cartoon ever. I will tell you this, and I think I've said this before on my stream. When I was a kid, I was always embarrassed by the songs sung in the Disney movies. And some of them are really well-written songs. You've got Aladdin, you've got Beauty and the Beast. Pocahontas has some of my favorite songs, just around the river bend. Very wonderfully written songs. But I remember as a kid always kind of wanting to skip over the songs. I didn't, even as someone who loved music, someone who was practicing music, I just didn't like songs in film. It kind of took me out of it. But now I have an appreciation for it. And if you're curious, I really don't have an affinity to Broadway. I'm not really a musical person. Characters breaking out into song still, I don't know why I never latched on to that. It always seems to pull me out. I love the it's kind of a joke, but with Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, where he's not in song. He's in the alley trying to, like, the villain. He's trying to, I think he's trying to not abduct, but confiscate or steal a van with some material. I can't really remember the plot. So he's in his real world. He's not breaking into song. But Penny comes up to him and she sings her song. She's asking if he wants to sign a petition for beds for the homeless. She had sung that song before, and then he had a song, and then he was in real life. He was just in normal life. So she walks up to him in song, and I laughed at that because it's not really. I think that was meant to be a joke. She's not really supposed to be in song. That's not supposed to be part of her world at that moment in that function of the musical. I thought that was pretty funny. And then he interrupts her like, and then she goes back to her normal speaking voice. Wolf 10 says, Narnia movies and Lord of the Rings movies are very distinct. Don't let anyone tell you Narnia's music channels. Don't let anyone tell you Narnia's music channels Lord of the Rings. This is laughable even to think. Can someone put the composer? I had only seen the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's okay. I wasn't really that impressed with the adaptation. I have not seen that probably since it was released. But I remember not being that impressed. I was always impressed by Howard Shore's score, though. Yes, I would consider Aslan the lion as an allegorical to Jesus Christ, which makes sense because Jesus is compared as the Lion of Judah. He is the lion. He is the king. He is that the lion represents in his name, or as a depiction, his kingship, his kingship over the Jews, over the children of Israel, and ultimately over the entire world. He's also referred to as the Lamb, as we talk about his atonement, his sacrificial atonement for us, for the remission of sins. So that's pretty cool. And then we'll get into more of that beautiful allegory in the second book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Now, I will say this. I love Wolf 10's support. He says, we have 18 watching, but no 18 thumbs up. Come on, people. Here's the thing. Only like it when you want to like it. You don't have to clutter up your liked videos for my account, for me. It's if you're like, she's doing okay tonight, I'm not going to like this one. I'm totally fine with that. But thank you. Thank you for the support. Professor Geek says, fascinating points about decibels and vibration. It's the very stuff of life. Cells vibrate. It makes sense to use music as creation. Even God audibly spoke creation into existence. Yeah, I mean, it was that word spoke. So maybe it's not. It could be an actual voice command, as we are his image. But if it is, that's vocals. That's something that has tone and that has some nuance and inflection and all of that. Yes, I do have synesthesia. So any musical depiction that has a visceral pairing, really, my imagination goes bonkers. I think Fantasia, I think the 1940s Disney Fantasia did that for me. And that's an interesting point. I haven't read Lovecraft. Deep One sounds very Lovecraftian. Yeah, it's the air moving, and it's also the sound moving in the ground. So it's pretty cool. Oh, oops! I think that the chat is jumping a little bit. Oh, good. Okay, so it's funny. I often like the songs in the musical plays. Yeah, that makes sense. But not when they're in the actual story. I like them separate. Yeah. No, I like Be Our Guest, for Beauty and the Beast. It's great. It's good. It's good writing. It's good lyrics. I might do some commentary, some analysis on Frozen. Because that's just, I'm not a songwriter, but that's just really bad writing. Sorry. There are strong points, but maybe I'm an anomaly because I don't really care for the Game of Thrones theme either. I can tell you that even though I think Game of Thrones is a little on the boring side as far as melody, I know what the composer did to make it sound exciting, but it's not the melody. So I don't know, I might do an analysis on that. Maybe I'll do like a streaming analysis on the two. Frozen's Let It Go and the Game of Thrones theme. I know they're different. I know they're very different, but there's this they've garnered such a popularity. It's just unheard of, and it's just not. Yeah, well, that's another time. We're talking about Magician's Nephew. All right, thank you, Daniel Craig. Harry Gregson Williams was the composer for the Chronicles of Narnia. Good. I like the theme. It's just, it definitely does have that epic Hollywood feel. It doesn't sound like Narnia to me, as best as I remember. I probably would have to look at the film again and see. maybe have a different perspective. I'm going off a 15-year-old memory. Alrighty. All right. Looks like you guys have some comments on my let it go and Game of Thrones, and then we'll get back to the book. All right. So Evie says, talk about how Let It Go is just a regular pop song. It is. It is. And the words are awful. You can stamp a great singer behind a terrible piece of music, and it will be accessible because of that. Sometimes talent can really dress the quality of the song. Oh, I think I've seen that. Yeah. There was also a medieval one that Troy posted a few weeks back that I listened to. Actually, I think with the medieval instruments, it sounds better. The only problem is it's a medieval instrument library, so it still has that punch of a modern post-production idea. But yeah, I got the vibe. I heard an awesome cover of the Game of Thrones theme the other day. It was a Western cover that reimagined it with the vein of spaghetti westerns. I can imagine that too. I know what you're talking about. All right. Let us continue. All right, so we're getting into the founding of Narnia. So we have the creation of Narnia, and this is in the chapter called "The Fight at the Lamppost." So now we're getting into the actual founding of Narnia, where things start to happen, where animals come to life and all that. And it begins right at the chapter 9. The lion was pacing to and fro about the empty land and singing his new song. It was softer, more lilting than the song by which he had called up the stars and the sun, a gentle, rippling music. And as he walked and sang, the valley grew green with grass. It spread out from the lion like a pool. So, the idea of rippling sound and then the green spreading from this lion like the rippling of a pool or a lake. It ran up the sides of the little hills like a wave. In a few minutes, it was creeping up the lower slopes of the distant mountains, making that young world ever softer. I think I read that sentence wrong. Let me try again. In a few minutes, it was creeping up the lower slopes of the distant mountains, making that young world every moment softer. So every moment, every passing moment, when you think of the word moment, it is temporal, of course. It's a unit of time, but it's indefinite. But when we think of moment, what do we think of? We think of a short duration. So this rapidly rippling of green, just going from the line all across the ground, all across these little small mountain, these small hills going up into the mountainscape. Soon there were other things besides grass. The higher slopes grew darker with heather. Patches of rougher and more bristling green appeared in the valley. Diggory did not know what they were until one began coming up quite close to him. It was a little spiky thing that threw out dozens of arms and covered these arms with green and grew larger at the rate of about an inch every 2 seconds. There were dozens of these things all around him now, and when they were nearly as tall as himself, he saw what they were: trees. So this is kind of getting into how Polly is perceiving it too, but the actual moment of a kind of creation, in this case trees, has a distinctly unique musical feature to it. So the trees will have its own feature. The rolling of the grass will have its own feature. There's this dressing of the landscape is a soft, rippling music. This is really, really beautifully done. I love that this music is, you can hear it out of your own imagination. He's not being completely direct. He's not being like a composer and telling you every single little musical event. The brilliance of Lewis is he's letting your own imagination take its course. And I actually think that is so imperative for authors, especially authors these days. let your readers think of the world and have their own imagination with the world and the going-ons in the world. Or goings on. I don't know how to use that phrase. But you have to trust that the reader is going to have its own their own imagination. Charm, you got a dead red sun in a desolate kingdom. And everything is dried up, dry as a bone. There's no water, there's no sound, there's no insect. That's pretty much all Lewis describes charm with. And I had the whole scene in my mind. He doesn't spoon feed you with descriptions. He just gives you enough. The rippling music causing the grass to go out from the lion over the hills and into the mountains. And then Diggory seeing these, like, the pepperings and the sprinklings and the shoots of the trees. That's all you need. And it's very active. It's a very active. Try to make something active. You don't have to be so direct and describe every detail, but do make it active. Pepper that imagination and let the reader run with it. And if the reader doesn't have an imagination, then that's that. But I do think writers, one reason why I don't really read too much contemporary fiction, by means of saying science fiction and fantasy, is I think they can go over the top with descriptions. And I think you should just have a couple key salient points, some focal points here and there, the depth and the breadth of a city, abandoned or likewise, the grayness of the landscape, something. A good book to look at this is A Wrinkle in Time. A Wrinkle in Time is a rather short book, but it's very expansive in terms of psychology and world building. But it gives you just enough to go on. And for the record, I saw scenes of the movie. I hadn't seen the movie. I don't really want to see the movie. That movie looks nothing like the book in my mind. I picture like a drearier world. It's not a sunny sunscape world. It's a very dreary world. But anyway, that was my imagination. And if it's supposed to be a sunny world, then I fell flat. But my imagination evoked a really dreary world that, its world, it was a brain. That was the world I remember as a kid. So just kind of pepper your readers' imaginations with some active cues and then roll with it. You'll save a lot of time and space, and also pacing. The pacing will be much better. Especially for an audience today where we've been just so blessed with so much film. We've seen so many movies. We know what world building looks like. We know what good world building looks like, even if we're not totally conscious of it. And so I would encourage writers to do what C.S. Lewis does with the description of the music. Make it active and succinct, and just let the imagination take its course. Whoever has that imagination, whatever the reader is or whoever the reader is. Okay, a couple more examples. All right. So there's talk about creation. So now that creation has budded and things are springing up and things are being brought forth, there's now a direct tie of visual and listening. So there was, reading from the book, there was certainly plenty to watch and to listen to. The tree which Diggory had noticed was now a full-grown beech whose branches swayed gently above his head. They stood on cool green grass, sprinkled with daisies and buttercups. I love that. I love it's the vegetation of our world. Cool. Buttercups exist in another world. That's pretty cool. A little way off along the riverbank, willows were growing. On the other sides, tangles of the flowering currant, lilac, wild rose, and rhododendron closed them in. The horse was tearing up the delicious mouthfuls of new grass. All this time, the lion's song and his stately prowl, to and fro, backwards and forwards, was going on. What was rather alarming was that at each turn he came a little closer. And then Polly, finding the song more and more interesting because she thought she was beginning to see the connection between the music and the things that were happening. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And there's a lot of art that goes with that, where there's a piece of music and then art either written with that music or produced with that music. You can think of even some visual art installations with sound experimentation. The idea of stoking the senses with the visual and the aural. So there's a connection between the music and the things that were happening. When a line of dark firs sprang up on a ridge about 100 yards away, she felt that they were connected to a series of deep, prolonged notes, which the lion had sung a second before. So this is really close. This is timing it just right. This is almost synchronous to what's happening. And when he burst into a rapid series of lighter notes, she was not surprised to see that primroses suddenly appearing in every direction. Thus, with an unspeakable thrill, she felt quite certain that all the things were coming, as she said, out of the lion's head. When you listened to his song, you heard the things he was making up. When you looked around you, you saw them. This was so exciting that she had no time to be afraid. And that's pretty cool too. If you've ever been in front of a piece of art or a piece of music, listening to a piece of music, maybe something symphonic, maybe a ballet, you can't help think of just that. You can't help think just that piece of art, how that piece of art grabs you. You don't think of your day at your job. You don't think of maybe how hard your week was. You don't think of maybe a relational problem you have with a friend or a relative. You just think about that art. It just kind of takes you, it transports you just to the thing itself, where you just don't need to be afraid. You don't need to be afraid of the world around you. I think that's very key. I think that's a duty, I think, of artists to really help people, work with people, let people live, let people experience joy and delight, because heaven knows, we all know that the world is really trying to put us down. And we need artists to bring people back up. So then there's a little bit more plot, and the witch throwing the iron bar at the lion's head. Of course, it glances off, and lion doesn't think of anything of it. So let's, I think, yeah, there's some more plot, and then I think a couple more examples. How's chat doing? Yeah, Troy, I was agreeing with you, and then I got your reference. Yeah, I tell you, man, I have so many thoughts on that. Why don't we just produce art for art's sake? Is that so hard? Man. But I just read the books. When I first heard that A Wrinkle in Time was going to be made to a film, I thought, man, it's about time. This is a really good story. I was looking at the trailer. I was like, this looks like nothing. Like, is it Mrs. Who, the first witch that we see in the book? It's either Mrs. Who or Mrs. Witch. I can't remember who it was. But she to me is like this frumpy, plump old lady with kind of, hair kind of going all which way, and she's covered in scarves, and she's in a trench coat because it's raining, or like in a very long coat and these boots. She's this awkward looking woman. She's really not she's not supposed to look magical. She's not supposed to look mysterious. And then I think they cast Oprah or something. I was like, she's not supposed to, these female characters, at least in my mind, they're not supposed to look really much like anything out of the ordinary. They're supposed to look eccentric, but nothing quite out of the ordinary. They're supposed to be just these ladies, just kind of like, they're talking about going into the fifth dimension like it's commonplace. And they look commonplace, they just look like they're out of the mundane. And so when I saw the trailer, it looked way too fantastical for me. it's supposed to be fantastical, but there's some mood in the A Wrinkle in Time, the book. There's some kind of gray, purpley mood of that book. It's supposed to be a dark, very terrifying book. I mean, there's some terrifying things in that book, and that movie just looked too magical. It just looked too colorful. It just didn't sit well with me. But I digress. We're talking about Narnia. Oh, good point. Quite frankly, the best version of A Wrinkle in Time is the interpretations of our own mind rather than the Hollywood version of it. Yeah, that's the thing, is I don't want a Hollywood film to kind of stain my interpretation of A Wrinkle in Time. It was a dark and stormy night. It was a dark and stormy night. That's how the book starts, and you kind of picture this attic room with the rain just kind of pummeling down on the windows, and I love Meg in the book because she's very insecure of herself, but there's this, charming boy who wants to be her friend. And I love it because even though she's kind of plain, she's supposed to be a plain looking girl. The thing that she has about beauty is her eyes. Her eyes are like this crystal blue, and he takes off her glasses and he sees a new beauty about her, and she's very touched by that. And then they go into this new dimension, and they get like crushed by space and time. It's really crazy. It's like, man, these kids are going through a lot. They're going through these dimensions. All right, so where was I? Yeah, so I have a couple other musical examples, and I don't really catch. There are some things I just don't catch as a kid that you catch as an adult. But this is now where the animals are coming into being. So all these hills are popping up, and then the hills burst forth, and it's the creation of an animal. Small hills, large hills, and all that. In a few minutes, Diggory came to the edge of the wood, and there he stopped. The lion was singing still, but now the song had once more changed. Again, transition. I love that C.S. Lewis says it's a musical transition into another thing. This is brilliant. It was more like what we should call a tune, but far wilder. That's interesting that he says it's a tune. It's something recognizable as a tune. Well, that's awesome, because now what Lewis is trying to convey is that it's something melodious. It's something with a melody, something that has a definitive melodic form, a melodic line. Whereas more we were kind of hearing a bit of an abstract idea. It's a bit of a, I could probably convey this once I get better at it in electronic music, but convey this scope with electronic music. But now we're talking about a melody, something that any sentient person, I would say maybe not sentient, any person with cognition or an ability to understand the world and what's going on, in this case, the world coming to life. If you can understand that the world is coming to life, you'll be able to understand this melody. We human beings understand melody. And this is true with people who have some sort of cognition impairment as well. People do understand melody. They can memorize melodies. And so this is the first time in the book, after the animals come about, that there's an actual melody. The reaction is a little bit different. It's a little unusual. I'm kind of surprised a Christian wrote this in, but he says, well, I mean, I'm not saying it's totally abominable. There's still propriety involved, because it's dealing with the human being and what it means to be human. But it was a far wilder melody, and made you want to run and jump and climb. It made you want to shout, and made you want to rush at other people and hug them or fight them. It made Diggory hot and red in the face. And it had an effect on Uncle Andrew, who's an adult. So what is this saying? This is hormonal. This is a hormonal response. And I was thinking when I was reading, it's like, man, this is like rock music. like this hysteria of the 50s and 60s. It's like, well, I don't know if Aslan was thinking rock, but that's a very unusual thing for a Christian author to write, to actually get the visceral hormonal response that this melody is drawing in this young boy. He doesn't understand it. He just wants to fight people and stuff like that and hug people. And then it kind of has a, more adult effect on Uncle Andrew. But the music continues. Can you imagine a stretch of grassy land bubbling like water in a pot? For that is really the best description of what was happening. In all directions, it was swelling into bumps, and they were talking about the hills bursting into animals. And I don't know. Now, this is the visual, so I don't know if there's an actual musical comparison. But now what's happening is this cacophony of wildlife and noise, and all these animals, all these birds and these critters and these creatures just giving their call. A horse braying, an elephant trumpeting, a crow or a raven cawing, and bees getting into work and all that good stuff. Leopards prowling and roaring. All the while that Aslan is still singing, but it can't really be heard now in the din of all this new life. And I love that you have leopards and all of that, and they're kind of just roaring and growling and snarling, but you actually have a lion who's not domesticated. He's totally wild himself, and he's that God comparison. But he's producing an intelligible or an intelligent melody. And I think that's a pretty interesting comparison. All right. So then after all creation, the first time that day, there was complete silence, except for the noise of running water. That's pretty interesting. So kind of like with the bell, where the bell's stopping, this huge just tone that starts pulling this room down, and then a quick silence, to really throw the person off, to really get them out of balance. Well, this is something new. Aslan has command. He has command of all the wildlife around him, all the cacophony, all the din and craziness going on. That new life just waking up in wonder and just roaming around and animals doing instinctive stuff like, prancing and a wild cat grooming or something like that. And then he calls them, he commands them, and it's completely silent. And then he brings animals 2 by 2, that they grow bigger, they can talk now, they're the rulers of their kind, the rulers of their kind. And it calls for silence apart from a river running. And that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. I love that use of silence. You got to use silence when you're a composer. You got to use silence as dichotomous, as it could be an antithesis of something. It could be a dichotomy of something. It could be contrast, or it could be something like something that complements a piece of music. So like if I have a synthesizer, but I want to add rhythm to the synthesizer, I'm gonna apply a noise gate to with another sound file. So the gate will only allow what I let it. And so if it brings it up and pulls it back and brings it up in a kind of rhythm, I'm using silence and sound as a rhythmic idea for that instrument. So I use silence that way. I also use silence in the way that there could be pockets of silence as well. So silence also really is a very effective component of music. Music and sound. All right. Oh, and then I like to add this one. The lion opened his mouth, but no sound came from it. He was breathing out a long, warm breath. It seemed to sway all the beast as the wind sways the line of trees. Far overhead, from beyond the veil of blue sky which hid them, the stars sang again, a pure, cold, difficult music. I love that. What does that mean when you hear the word difficult music? What does that convey to you? What does that illustrate? As someone who's into music, who's been into music and who's played difficult music, who's composed difficult music, I can understand that it is music that is hard to comprehend, music that is hard to piece together, the music that may have a flow, but also has a lot of complexities. Maybe music that has complexities that the mind can't grasp or that the ear can't really grasp, with sounds that we are not accustomed to, in a sequence of events that we are not accustomed to. That's quite common in contemporary music. That could convey difficult music. I also think that difficult music, I can also think of it being produced something that is not quite human, meaning something that could be electronically generated in this world, for instance. So an unusual soundscape that is produced electronically or with computers that really might not be produced by a person or a human, of course, or an instrument that we've seen for at least the last couple hundred years, if not longer. So this idea of otherworldly, what would a piece of music sound like otherworldly? This is why I'm not opposed to producing electronic music that displays Ainulin Dale. People would say, well, would you compose Ainulin Dale for an orchestra or for a choir? I would only if I had the skill to compose for an orchestra, but I really don't have the skill anymore to compose for an orchestra. My skill now is in sound experimentation with electronic music, but I can make something relatable with electronic music. So I love that the stars are described as cold, pure, and difficult, something hard to grasp. So what does that lend to you, in your imagination? What does that sound like to you? It could be anything. It can be anything. All right, and the last example. And this is actually a very short example, and Catholic Bible Geek touched on this as well, and that was Aslan bringing forth the cabbie's wife to become the first queen of Narnia. And it says, Aslan threw up his shaggy head. I could just imagine like a lion just going on like his hind legs or something, or at least, doing kind of a dance, like a toss of the head. Opened his mouth and uttered a long single note, kind of like a long single note, like a long single tone of the golden bell. Not very loud, but full of power. He's really not described as magical. Maybe the kids perceive him as magical, but he's really associated with power. His creation has come from him. And I love that, Polly's heart jumps and Polly's heart jumped in her body when she heard it. She felt sure that it was a call and that anyone who heard the call would want to obey, and what's more, would be able to obey it. And however many worlds or ages that lay between. So even time, this goes beyond space and time. Now, I love that it's not very loud, but full of power. It's a single note, not very loud. A long single note, not very loud, but full of power. That's beautiful because you can actually produce a moderately loud tone or even a quiet tone on an instrument or with electronic instrument and still have power. A very experienced orchestra, for instance, can play very quietly, but still play with energy. When we think of energy in sound, we think of volume, we think of velocity, we think of speed, we think of something that is produced fast. And if it's produced fast, maybe it's produced loudly. But the same can be true for energy in the style and example of a musician, especially a professional musician. They can play quietly, but also quietness with such power and presence as well. I mean, some of the greatest violin players in the world, sometimes they'll play something so dramatic and so loud with the whole orchestra, and then the orchestra will just kill off, just cut it. And then it's just this real high, just totally controlled, totally quiet violin tone. And it just like, it really speaks. It could bring tears to your eyes when you have that experience. So I like that. And I think that's all as far as the musical examples. But, calling forth someone from another world between time or not time. Actually, Narnia time is different. The experience in Narnia is different from temporal experience in the modern world, the mundane that in this case is London. But calling forth another being. And I love that the wife, she just understands she has to be there. Like she's okay with it. She's blushing, she's bashful, and the cabbie man stands next to her, and then they're ready to become king and queen. It's really cool. It's when they see Aslan and they know they have to be there. It's like it's the most natural thing in the world. And I think that's a beautiful description of how when God feels distant, because in a strange way, if you don't spend time with him in his word and in prayer and in worship, yeah, of course he'll feel distant. But when he's there with you in your experience, especially with prayer and in your walk, there's just no other way to be. There's just no other way. It feels absolutely natural to be in his presence and in his holiness. And I love allegory in this way. I love it done in this way. I think C.S. Lewis is wise to use allegory with something like a Judeo-Christian idea, because Judeo-Christian history is quite long. We have a huge history. Something that's allegorical to a current event might not hold sway or stick for very long, because that thing will not last long. So the allegory to that thing might not last long, or it might become irrelevant. So I think that's it for the book. Let's see what chat is saying. And I mean, depending on the conversation, I might break or adjourn around 11:30, but we'll see. Wolf 10 says, The Wrinkle in Time, the movie, looked like a Never-Ending Story ripoff. That's just too bad. Yeah, aren't they flying on something? I don't think they fly on something. And Aunt Beast had better been done right. Aunt Beast is really cool. She's a really cool character. Oprah says, check out your Majesty, and you get a car, and you get a magic car, and you get a magic car. That didn't happen in the music, right? Or the movie, right? That'd be bad. Schooner Tuna says, Sound Engraver, do not despair. With instructors like you, thank you, the Professor, Wolf 10 Media, Troy, and countless others here on the chat, we will keep the faith and integrity of storytelling. Absolutely. Here. That's a good mission. That's a good mission. Chase the dream. No. Be the dream. Be is more active. Well, chase is active too, but it's like the dream is away from you. You gotta actually live the dream. But that's just me being a music teacher and saying, practice. Professor Geek says, excellent point about melody touching even the neurodivergent minds. Alyssa is always singing along with songs I've only played once or twice. Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple students. Well, I remember one student in particular. You don't really have to tell him much. Yeah, actually, except for technique. I was on him on technique. I'm like, Jonathan, you need to get that wrist back. And he's like, why? And get that violin up. Why? Because it's good technique. I don't want you to have a crooked neck. And I really had to beat the bush with him as far as good technique. But as far as musicality and as far as picking up music and music notation, oh my goodness. He would look at a piece of music and just be able to play it. I remember asking him one time, I can't remember what it was. It was like a musical gesture. It was like a bit of rhythm on a page of music. And I said, Jonathan, how many instances, how many of this do you see on the page? He didn't even have to count. He's like, 11. I was like, how did you know so fast? It's pretty amazing. He's not a tame lion, but he's good. That's the beauty of Aslan, is he's not tame, but he's good. When you think of not tame, you think of wild, you think of restless, you think of restive, you think of something that's a dangerous force. And Aslan can be dangerous. He isn't safe, as Mrs. Beaver says, or Mr. Beaver says. He isn't safe, but he's good. That's awesome. Life is full of risk, people. We don't always have to be safe. That's the message to the world. We don't always have to be safe, but we must strive to be good. Got to tell that to the mainstream social media. Yeah, okay. I know this is directed to Wolf 10, but back to the drawing board. This is really important. It's like one of many great Luce's lines, emphasizing that we don't need to be mild to be good. Now, as Christians, we're taught to be meek, but meekness is subdued strength. Meekness is kindness, hospitality, graciousness, but unwavering in your principles, in your truth. So it's like, stand up to truth, stand up for yourself and stand up for truth, but you can do it in love and you can do it in kindness. And then that's an example of meekness. It's strength that is enclosed. It's strength that is encapsulated in the form of kindness, in the form of grace and love and mercy. But it doesn't mean you're a pushover. I'm learning that on social media right now. Don't be a pushover. Be kind, but don't be a pushover. And sometimes, guys, just for the record, if you're tired of this, all the narrative going on and people silencing people, you know what you ought to do? Like, if you're finding that people are bullying you, just say, hush up. Say it like you're from the South. Hush up. Knock it off. Just be quiet. I'm not listening to you anymore. I would say hush up is a little kinder than shut up. Let's see. Oh, okay, good. That's a good comparison. Daft Punk always sounded otherworldly to me. Yeah. Good soundtrack is Tron. It's got a great electronic track. I don't know. Oh, okay. Yeah. I get that. Maybe I'll listen to the reference. A lot of people are talking about just different shows and music. What? They flew on a cabbage leaf? I've read that book a few times as a kid, and I don't remember no cabbage leaf. Dr. Y says, I've been thinking of involving singing in my story. There is a healer character I have who sings song to soothe her patients. I call her the siren. Yeah. I mean, in siren, as far as like myth goes, they're supposed to be luring creatures that, ultimately mean your destruction. But yeah, that works as well. Oh, chase the dream is my line. I encourage them to chase it for you. When they achieve it, they must now live the dream. Yeah. I mean, I'm not achieving all of my dreams. I mean, that's just the process. Very true. Silence, you fool. Well, Wolfton, you can say that. Yeah, exactly. Not you though, Essie. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. Now, actually, yeah, but I actually, guys, I know there's all these things, like people want to silence everyone, and everyone is so offensive. Like you say something that people disagree with. Like I posted a tweet. I'm not going on Twitter for a week. I'm just gonna let Twitter blow off some steam. I posted a tweet that was a sentiment. It was politically expressed, but there was no foul language involved. I didn't diss on anyone who disagreed with me. I didn't do anything offensive. But the I don't know what my Twitter looks like right now, but the reaction that I got, fortunately, some of them they criticized me before they unfollowed me, but at least they used respectful language, as respectfully as they could. They didn't swear at me or anything like that, which was great. I'm very happy. If they unfollow me, that's their choice. But I was thinking, man, like if it gets worse, if the reaction actually gets worse for what I had tweeted, I was thinking I could probably say something really controversial and we get the same reaction. To that, I say, if you're kind and you express something that you believe, you hold to be true, stick to it, stick to your principles, be kind in the process. But if people start bullying you, you need to say, enough, knock it off, quiet. And you just need to say, that's enough. You need to actually reprimand them like children. You have to do it in an adult way. You have to do it in a diplomatic way. But I've had students who have had attitude with me. I'm strict when it comes to technique. Oh, but I get strict when I get an attitude. I get strict when I get an attitude when a student with an attitude tells me I'm wrong about my instrument. I said, listen, I've played this instrument 3 times as many years as you've lived. Now I don't raise my voice. I actually lower my voice. If you're in a situation where it's face to face, you get low, you drop your tone, and you say, that's enough. You get angry in a very low, controlled way. You tell them who's boss. I unfortunately can't do that on a tweet. But if it gets to the point, if it gets to the point where things are, face to face, you have to say, that's enough. I'm not going to be bullied. You're not going to walk all over me. You need to stop now. People can do this. They can bully you behind text. They can bully you behind an unspoken word. This is the beauty and truth about the spoken word. People can hear your voice. They can hear your kindness, but they can hear your seriousness. You're not persuasive with text, unfortunately. You don't, your opinion, or you're standing for the truth or for freedom or for your principles, it's not going to be persuasive at all through text. And I am seeing this, unfortunately, with social media. It's like, yeah, I can say something and it can sound quite forceful. And this is why I love streaming, is that you can see my face, you can hear my voice, you can understand who I am, you can understand my expression, you can understand I have nothing up my sleeve. That phrase, nothing up your sleeve, means I don't have a weapon. I'm not going to I'm not going to show you my weapon. It's like Wonder Woman. I'm extending the hand. But if people keep knocking on me and bullying me, or as they might bully you, you just got to say enough. And you just got to say, stop it. I know you're trying to cancel me. I know you're trying to silence my voice. But I'm going to continue. I'm going to, continue prodding on. I'm going to continue working. I'm going to continue producing. And if you don't agree with me, that's fine. But you're not going to silence me. You're not going to silence me. And I would say, if you're trying to persuade, or if you're trying to present an idea or truth or even a political sentiment, I would advise, guys, I really would advise people hearing your voice. When I hear someone's voice, I seem to know them. It feels like I know them. Maybe not on a personal level. Maybe not I want to meet them in a coffee shop or something, but I feel like I can register them much better than with text. Now, you guys don't have a choice right now because you're on chat. Oh, but I know a lot of what your voices sound like. I know Wolf 10, I know H Boomer, I know Big Al Presents, I know the Prof. Excuse me. I had a big meal. I know Troy. I know Nanette. Hearing the voices, hearing people's voices helps me know. And so I guess this is kind of a tie-in with Aslan's song, where he breathes, where he sings things into existence. And you're going to, people say, let your voice be heard. Your voice is not heard on social media. And I mean that not just literally. I mean also that figuratively. Like, your voice has no stance as much as in compared to your actual present voice. Now, what am I saying with all this? I don't know. You could start your own channel for those of you who haven't already. But, you know, I would say kind of getting into the holiday season, and especially with the change of coming up into the new year, I would say if you want your art heard or seen, I would say talk about your art. Let people hear your voice. It doesn't have to be live. It could be a fixed commentary video. It could be like in a podcast. You could read out loud your blog or your article on YouTube or some other platform. But I would just say I'm in meekness. I have my strength. I have his strength, really. It's the Lord's strength. But I would say in meekness, be strong. Be strong, be kind, but do not budge. Don't let the bullies give you an inch. They'll vilify you. They'll call you stuff, but don't give them an inch. Give them your voice. Let them hear your voice. And that's all for me. Let's see. That's good. Jedi Master Seatopia says, you are right about not achieving all your dreams. I still have not been bitten by a radioactive spider. Radioactive. I remember working in a restaurant at a hotel, and that song was blaring every morning at 7 in the morning in the kitchen. Lowering your voice in anger might just be scarier. Who knows how actually you feel under composure? No, that's yeah, it's not that I want to be unreadable, but I have a cousin, and she's a single mom, and she has 4 kids, and kids like where their ages are boom 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 boom. So like between, I think when I was you know, visiting her, I think it was like, I think the age was between, well, actually for a while it was 7 to 10, I think, or 7 to 11. And now of course it's older as time has gone. But, you know, they were rowdy kids. They were really hyperactive kids. And sometimes she would kind of like, you know, kind of feign the, exacerbated. I don't think I said that word right. You know, kind of that mom, like, oh, you children and stuff like that. Oh, but when they got out of hand and out of line, you need to go to your room. I mean, like her voice level was like this low, volume and in pitch. When her voice was that low, all children just went dead white. And they would say, and they would try to whimper in protest. She's like, nope, you go to your room. They knew she was absolutely serious when she lowered her voice and she dropped her pitch down. She had a low voice. She has a low voice anyway. But when it got really low, I remember when I don't have students that give me attitude anymore. But I remember having a couple and they had an attitude with me. I didn't tolerate it. Yeah, it was on camera. I don't care. I could have, you know, lost a job or something like that. I'm not hostile, but I say, do not use that tone with me again. I got some tears. And then I would say, okay. And then I would try to butter them up. But no, get quiet and get serious, especially with, you know, these people like, you know, that's what they sound like now. All these people that are so offended by everything. You know what you do to that dog? You slap the muzzle. Sorry, Daniel Heron, if that's a method that you don't do. You just go, boom, that's enough. Or maybe like a flick on the nose. That's enough. That's what you do. I don't know, Daniel, are you hearing? Am I wrong? Is that abuse? I just realized we have a friend in our camp that has a lot of dogs. They're well behaved though. I've been on, not been on as a guest, but I've been on his chat with his live stream where he's got 10 dogs and they are quiet during his podcast or his live stream. I don't know how 10 dogs can be all quiet. So you have my permission, guys. Be kind, but be stern. Yeah, I bet, yeah, you have said that too. You've talked about that. Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, back in the 90s, I think 90s was really the last decade of bullying as a youth or as an adolescent. Because, people, especially young people in school, experience bullying. I didn't experience bullying like I think boys experience bullying. I experienced more of that kind of mean girls kind of popular girl kind of bullying that I faced, I think, in 5th and 6th grade and maybe into 7th grade. But now adults, it's like we've had these bullying tendencies, but media hasn't taught us. I think media has just exposed us to these propensities that it is, brought to light. So anyway, I think I'm going to wrap it up. All right. I don't know. I don't know what we're talking about here. Troy Pacelli says, we have had a whole generation that was not raised on any kind of discipline. When you have news footage of adults having tantrums in streets over current events, it's insane. Yeah, the thing is, I did grow up with my parents, but I also grew up with my grandparents. And you learned etiquette and decorum with my grandparents. How foolish and naive I was to think that the bullying would stop at a young age. I don't understand. Common sense. Like, this is probably nitpicking, but one person who criticized me on Twitter, he said, "Dude." I'm like, I'm not a dude. I'm a lady. Just basic etiquette. It's not a big deal. But the way, and actually, so far the criticizers that I had on my tweet, they actually spoke in complete sentences, and there was no profanity, and that was awesome. I was very happy about that. So they probably associated me with some other stuff, but they at least constructed sentences. But just decorum. I remember having, I might have said this before, but I remember having a relative who thought etiquette was overrated and decorum was overrated. And, it's like, it's okay to have elbows on the table, and it's okay to, belch at the dinner table or something like that. Now, here's the thing, maybe, but the problem is the same person had done terribly, almost irreparable damage on people around me who I loved. So it was like, okay, you're not for etiquette, but you're for a lot of other bad stuff too. So it's like, no, decorum, decency, being respectful. Just say, okay, you disagree with me, and move on. If you want to unfollow me, that's fine. There are no hard feelings. But it's like, now my criticizers weren't disrespectful with their text, but I have seen, oh my gosh, especially with Gina Carano, it's very depressing how people just they really do go animalistic with their text. I would like a game show, not a game show, like a reality TV show, because I don't watch reality TV show, but I would like. I want Gina Carano in a ring, and I want her attackers on Twitter to face her one by one, not one on one, not in a fight, not in an MMA fight, but just talking to her, talking to her. That's all. That's all I would want. That's all I would ask for. Dr. Weiss says, Christians are called to be good. We are not called to be nice. Just remember, Jesus made a whip to chase out the money changers in the temple. Yeah. No, that's really important. I'm starting to learn that with strength and meekness, we do have to overcome a grave evil that's kind of settling in our country. I for the longest time as a Christian, I thought, well, we're going to, the Lord's sovereign, which is true. And things are just going to play out how he wants anyway, which is also true. But in that, up until this point, up until really this year, I sort of played around with that idea with apathy. Like, okay, well, there's nothing I can do. He's going to have his will be done anyway. So if it's bad, I just have to like live through it and stuff like that. But, I think we are held accountable. I think we are held morally and spiritually responsible for fending off evil as best as we can. As best as we can. I think that's very important for Christians to know that we have to have this understanding that evil is in the world, and we have to embrace the consequences of evil, not just our own internal evil and our own sin. We actually do in this world, even though we're separate from this world, Christians, I'm talking about Christians, this might not apply to anyone else listening. It doesn't apply to anyone else listening. We do have to understand we're separate from the world, but we are still in the world. It's like we're not of the world, but we're in the world. And we have to understand that the world is very dark and very, very, very evil, very odious and very insidious and very malicious and very problematic. And I use that word. I use that word, problematic. And we have to, strap up the bootstraps or pull up the bootstraps, but also understand that we have to march on as well. We have to march and soldier on and soldier through. And I think part of that takes the form of fending off evil, fending off the world. Casting pearls before swine. Man, I'm learning that in different ways in my life. And you just have to understand that some things just can't be tolerated at the best, what am I trying to say? In the best way possible, in your best way possible, you have to show people and tell people that you can't tolerate evil. You just can't tolerate it. It's like, sorry, no, I'm not going to buy that. You say one thing and you mean another thing. I'm not going to tolerate hypocrisy. You say this and it's applying to this one. No, I'm not going to tolerate that double standard. If you're holding me by a standard, I'm going to hold you by the same standard. And something like that, being strong in your stance. Things are inevitable, that is for sure. But, I think we also have a duty to at least protect as many people, around us as we love from certain evil. I'm scary when I'm mad. I can imagine. I've heard you angry. But I've heard you angry more like over geek stuff. I haven't heard you angry over, like life stuff. I can imagine. Don't be ever angry. Don't ever be angry with me, Troy. My niece straightens up when I put my foot down at her antics. Yeah, I can imagine that. True that. I'm just saying Christians should fight apathy as well. All right. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I look forward to your upload on Overindulgence. Yes, it's going to be good. Well, I mean, I think it's good. I was pretty proud of it. I just have to put the pictures up and render it and stuff like that. I think I'll watch it Friday though. Yeah, I'm not expecting people to watch it on Thanksgiving, but I wanted to put it on Thanksgiving because Thanksgiving, as wonderful as the holiday is, it does get a bad rap for gluttony. Yeah, we Americans can be a little gluttonous when it comes to Thanksgiving. So we can overindulge in the delicious food and drink with this holiday. So I thought, yeah, let's talk about overindulgence in art. And I think the streaming the following week will be perfect because we're getting into the Christmas holiday where we can overindulge in materialism and in our finances. And I know people say, oh, times are hard these days. I don't think Christmas is going to be I think Christmas is going to be scant. I think people somehow find a way to get a little bit too much. Live below your means, guys. Live below your means. No, I do want to see that MMA fight between Gina Carano and her Twitter attackers. I think that is a brilliant idea. Let's make it happen. Let's sign a petition, guys. Let's make a petition and do it. I don't want people to get hurt though. She looks like she can do some damage. But boy, like people just have no logical wall when it comes to social media. Like you are attacking an MFA fighter, a professional one at that. It's like the fallacies of social media living. Yes, thank you. Oh, let's see. I'm sorry, I'm skipping. There's no such thing as ending evil. We must strike it down and prepare the next generation and strike it down when we leave this world. It is true. We do have to strike it down. Apathy and nihilism have definitely taken hold in the world. Suddenly we must now find humanity within cynicism. Oh my gosh. We got to pull people out of cynicism. I actually do think we're in for some very, very hard times personally, but I'm not cynical. I'll still have my sense of humor and I'll still have my levity and my joy, but I understand there could be hard times ahead. The humanity is still there, but we need to get shaken out of our society, our being apathy. Sorry, our being society. Well, thank you, Wolfton. Yeah, okay, so you'll be live. I'll be away from computers on that day, but yeah, I'll definitely drop the video. Hope you have Thanksgiving. Great Thanksgiving, Sound Engraver. Don't forget, I'll be live streaming at some point Wednesday night. I won't. I'm excited to be joining the chat. So good. All right, so we're coming on almost 2.5 hours. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. So it's gonna probably be a pretty scant week, as far as activity, rewatches, and stuff like that. But let's go ahead. Anyone involved, Troy is always obliged to do his thing with the links and stuff. But I would say anyone. Oh, I don't think. Wait, this is my channel. I think we only have a few wrenchers, moderators. But let's talk about rewatches. Okay. So what I do know is Netter's Network has a rewatch of the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. Wait, today's Monday. I thought it was Tuesday because Catholic Bible Geek channel was on tonight. Okay, so Wednesday, she has a show, a live rewatch with Aged Boomer, and actually pin that time, Nanette or Troy, because I actually don't know what time it is. Prof looks like he's going to have a Wednesday night stream as well, but he'll probably work around Netter's rewatch. I'm guessing, or maybe it's later. And it's such a short rewatch, so we'll see what happens. I'll tune in. I don't think I'll watch the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving special because I have it memorized. I'm not singing that in tune. I'm trying to sound jazzy, but I can't. Not right now. I'm kind of tired. So we've got that. Good. So Netta just posted her link there. Charlie Brown Thanksgiving Rewatch. 9 p.m. Central. Okay. 10 p.m. Eastern time. Cool. Very cool. That'll be a nice time. That'll be a nice time. Good. All right. So Thanksgiving, I'm dropping my overindulgence in art with my Ahsoka Tano commentary. Thursday. I don't know when. Probably in the afternoon. I'm not sure. Probably 2 or something. 3. Noon, whatever the case may be. It's going to be about 20, 21 minutes. So, and I'll have pictures. I got a lot of pictures to load on that video. My whole desktop is full of pictures right now. And so that'll be good. Fan Man, is Fan Man doing anything tomorrow? No, tomorrow's Tuesday. Is Fan Man doing anything Wednesday morning? Just check out his channel. Maybe he might do a Second Cup Cafe this Wednesday morning. Also, we got some rewatches. Do we have a rewatch happening Thanksgiving on Troy's channel? Is it Trains, Planes, and Automobiles on Troy's channel? Also send me a rewatch or whatever the rewatch is going to be, what channel is going to be Saturday night. That'll be fun. And of course, we've got, it looks like we might have WCR for Wolf 10, maybe tomorrow, maybe Thursday. He usually airs Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. I think 2:30 Pacific time, if I'm correct. So that's good to know. I think it's Pacific time. But in any case, all these things are on the Professor Geek Facebook group page, which I feel like is acting a little more civil than another. Tweet. I'm gonna do like a sound sample of "Listen to the Mockingbird" when I talk about. Oh, okay. That's gonna be my cue, guys. Every time I talk about a certain tweet platform, I'm gonna start humming. That's "Listen to the Mockingbird." So that's the melody for that. Okay. Just kind of okay. Probably should post this. Okay. Netters Network, Wednesday night, a Charlie Brown special rewatch. And 9 p.m. Central Time, so 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you, Wolf10, on my commentary. That's wonderful. Resident Evil stream tomorrow, so horror stream. Is that on your channel, Wolf10, or is that Green Lion Girls? I'm doing Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Is that 10 p.m.? Oh, yeah. See, okay, I Troy, I don't know. You can have that in the chat. I don't know if I consciously should endorse that. I don't know. You said it had Dolly Parton in it, which can mean anything, by the way. All right, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Oh, Eastern time. So 11:30 Pacific time. Okay, thank you for clarifying. Good. All right, and then we've got, of course, study hall on Age of Boomers channel on Saturday nights. Those are always fun. And look out for the anime rewatches or we-watches between the different channels, but always go on the Facebook group page. So I think I'll stop there. I actually really have to get going, so I will wish you all a wonderful Thanksgiving. If the prof has something streaming the day before on Wednesday, I'll probably tune in as well, so maybe we can all have a nice chat there. But until I see you next, keep producing the art you love. And I wish you a wonderful holiday, and we will